In 1882, a young man stepped off a boat at the port of Jaffa, carrying almost nothing. A small bag, a dream too large to hold. He had come from Russia, where the pogroms had taken everything. He had come because a land that had not known Jewish farmers in 2,000 years was calling them home. What he found was not the paradise of memory. The coastal plain was a malarial swamp. The hills were bare. The American writer Mark Twain had visited 15 years before and written, "A desolate country. We never saw a human being on the whole route." This was the land the pioneers came to, and they knelt down, and they began. The first enemy was not the soil. It was the mosquito, the swamps of the Jezreel Valley, and the hula-bred malaria that killed settlers or left them trembling with fever for months. Early colonies like Petah Tikva, named the Gate of Hope, were abandoned, then rebuilt, then abandoned again as the fever swept through. Young people who had left families behind in Poland and Romania found themselves not farming, but fighting a war against invisible things in the air. Some went home. Some died. Those who stayed drained the swamps by hand. They planted eucalyptus trees, which absorbed the water and dried the ground. Ditch by ditch, field by field, they refused to leave. Aaron David Gordon was 48 years old when he decided he had been living the wrong life. He had been a comfortable estate manager in Russia, educated, bookish, respected. Then he read about the young people going to Palestine to build something new, and something in him broke open. He emigrated in 1904, not to manage, to farm. He refused the office jobs offered to him. He went to the fields. He picked oranges until his hands bled. He plowed in the summer heat. And each evening, covered in dirt, he wrote. He wrote about what he called the religion of labor, his belief that after 2,000 years of exile, the Jewish people could only heal by returning to the earth with their own hands. He wrote, "We came to the land to build it, and to be rebuilt by it." He died in 1922, still farming, still writing. His words became the soul of a generation. In 1909, 12 young men and 2 young women gathered beside the Jordan River at the southern shore of the Sea of Galilee and made a covenant. They were mostly in their 20s, recently arrived from Russia and Poland. The land they had purchased, with money collected coin by coin, was rocky, scrubby, barely cultivable. They had almost no farming experience, but they made one decision that changed everything. Every choice would be made together, every meal eaten together, every field worked by their own hands. Total equality between men and women. They called this place Degania, from the Hebrew word for grain. It was the world's first kibbutz. That first winter, they were hungry. They were sick. Several wanted to leave. But the harvest came, and they stayed. In the decades that followed, 270 kibbutzim would grow from that one small covenant beside the river. The children of the kibbutz grew up barefoot in the Jordan Valley, the children of people who had come from the cities of Europe to live with the soil. They ate at long communal tables. They learned to read Hebrew under trees. Their parents worked from sunrise to sunset, in the fields, in the dairy, in the kitchen that fed everyone. The work was hard. The heat was brutal. But those children grew up with something that can barely be described today, a sense that every seed planted was an act of defiance. Against exile, against fear, against 2,000 years of wandering. They were building something that had never existed before, and the land was beginning slowly to answer. In 1901, at the Fifth Zionist Congress in Basel, a small tin box was passed around. Blue. Simple. It became known as the blue box, the pushka, They were placed in Jewish homes across the world, in every country where Jews lived. Children dropped in pennies on Fridays before the Sabbath candles were lit. Grandmothers dropped in coins in memory of the dead. From apartments in New York to small towns in Poland, the blue coins accumulated. The money bought land in Palestine. 1 acre, then 10, then 100. What the blue box understood, that perhaps nothing else did, is this: that love for a place can cross the world in coins, and that a land can be watered from 10,000 miles away by people who will never see it bloom. With the land purchased, it had to be made alive. Workers planted pine, cypress, oak, and carob on hillsides that had been bare for centuries. They planted in the Judean hills, in the Galilee, on the slopes of the Carmel. They planted in memory of the dead and in hope for the unborn. Over 120 years, more than 240 million trees have been planted in Israel, one of the largest afforestation programs in human history. Where Mark Twain saw bare stone, forests now stand. Where there was silence, there is the sound of wind in the branches. The land that was called desolate has remembered how to be green. Sometime in the late 1930s, an Israeli water engineer named Simcha Blas was walking along a fence line in the Negev desert. He stopped. Along the fence, a row of young trees had been planted, but one tree stood apart from all the others. Dramatically larger, greener, more alive. Its neighbors were struggling. This one was thriving. Blas knelt down and looked at the base of that tree. He found a pipe, slightly cracked, leaking almost invisibly. For years, it had been releasing a tiny, constant drip of water directly into the soil near the roots. Drop by drop, day by day, season by season, the other trees had been left to the mercy of rain. This tree had been quietly, secretly, precisely watered. Blas stood up and looked at that tree for a long time. He had just witnessed the future of farming. Blas spent years, and then decades, turning what he had seen in that one tree into a technology that could be manufactured and used anywhere on Earth. In 1959, he partnered with Kibbutz Hatzerim, a struggling, half-starving kibbutz in the heart of the Negev, where the annual rainfall was barely 8 inches. In 1965, they founded a company together. They called it Netafim, from the Hebrew word for drop. The kibbutz that had been dying in the desert built a factory. The factory built emitters by the millions. The emitters went into fields across Israel, then across the world. Today, Netafim operates in 110 countries. Kibbutz Hatzerim, once a desperate outpost in the sand, became one of the wealthiest kibbutzim in Israel, all from one leaking pipe, all from one tree that refused to die. In 1953, David Ben-Gurion, the man who had declared Israeli independence 5 years before, who had led a nation through war, resigned as prime minister and moved to a small kibbutz in the middle of the Negev desert. Sde Boker, surrounded by nothing but rock and scrub. He worked in the sheep barn. He woke at dawn. He ate at the communal table. People asked why he had chosen this. He answered with words he had said before, that had become a kind of prophecy. It is in the Negev that the creativity and pioneer vigor of Israel shall be tested. He was not making a political statement. He was making a promise, and he wanted to live inside it. Today, the state of Israel, no larger than New Jersey, 60% of a desert, receiving less annual rainfall than Los Angeles, produces 95% of its own food. It recycles 87% of its wastewater for agricultural use. The global average is under 10%. The cherry tomato, now eaten in every country on Earth, was developed by Israeli agricultural researchers in the 1970s. Israel's flower farms supply European markets through the winter. The drip irrigation technology born from one leaking pipe in the Negev now feeds hundreds of millions of people across Africa, Asia, and South America. From the pioneers who came to a malarial swamp in 1882, to the engineer who knelt beside a tree in the desert, to the kibbutz families who made a covenant beside the Jordan River, a people and a land made each other. That is what it means to make the desert bloom.